Have you noticed the effect that touch has on taste? Whether the food itself, the utensils that you're using, or the clothes that you're wearing? This is Gastrophysics, book by Charles Spence, and it's about food and human perception. And this section is all about taste. So I'm going to see if I need to make my cup heavier, for example, or make it more fuzzy to enjoy my tea. Let's get into it. This section is about the hands. Is the first taste really with the hands? In many parts of the world, think like Africa or the Middle East or the Indian subcontinent, people mostly eat with their hands. However, in the restaurant setting, especially in Western countries, we nearly always eat with the aid of cutlery, be it cold, smooth knife or fork in the West, or chopsticks in the East. And whenever we drink, we always pick up a cup or a glass or a bottle first. Except when we drink through a straw, but that's a very bad idea. Don't do that because it messes up what you smell. In a very real sense, then, the first taste is with the hands. According to the sensory scientists, the flavor chemists, and so on, the feel of the cutlery or the drinking vessel shouldn't exert any influence over the taste of the food and drink, nor should it really affect how much you enjoy the tasting experience. After all, everyone, chefs, food critics, and so on, regular customers, they all simply ignore the everything else and concentrate on the taste of the food on the plate or the flavor of the drink in our glass. However, we can't do this. It is impossible. By this stage of the book, you should be convinced that the everything else really does matter, and we feel no different here. In truth, it is more of an influence on our experience of food and drink than many of us would like to credit, for example, or even what we'd want to believe. So your utensils or whatever, you're touching your food directly. A growing body of research from the emerging field of gastrophysics now demonstrates how what we feel tactily can really influence our tasting experience. Some of the world's top chefs, molecular mixologists, culinary artists, and even packaging and cutlery designers are starting to pay much more attention to what we feel when we eat and drink. They're playing around with changing everything from the texture and weight through the temperature and firmness of whatever we happen to be holding in our hands while consuming it. And take note, they are not stopping with the hands. The most creative, experienced designers out there are also thinking about how to simulate and stimulate your lips and even your tongue more effectively. I never thought about stimulating the lips while eating. Do you really like the feel of cold and smooth metal? We did not evolve to find cold smoothness of stainless steel or silver cutlery particularly appealing to touch. Rather, we were always meant to eat with our hands. So why are so many of our interactions with food mediated by metal cutlery? As a top interior designer, Isla Crawford once put it, surfaces made from natural materials are often preferable as irregularity is far more sensual than clinically perfect surfaces. To my way of thinking, it's bizarre. So many of the world's top chefs are doing such amazing things on the plate, assuming that there is a plate. That's not always guaranteed these days. And they're expressing culinary genius and creativity in a way that we have never seen, nor that we could have even imagined back in the 70s. And yet, those same chefs have their diners eat with traditional combination of knife, a fork, and a spoon. That isn't very imaginative, now is it? This kind of reminds me of Arnold Schoenberg, the composer, music composer. He did lots of orchestral music, and he wrote in this sort of weird atonal system. Specifically, he founded this serialist movement where every single note was exactly represented in a scale. Very bizarre, kind of interesting music, but he always wrote in very standard timing. Like the structure of the music was pretty consistently classical structure, and the rhythms were pretty consistently classical rhythm, and all of the music was pretty much in 4/4 or 3/4. There was no branching out in terms of the rhythm or the timing. It's like a major oversight, or maybe he's just obsessed specifically with tonality. But anyway, same thing going on here. Weird stuff with plates, weird stuff with foods, but cutlery being neglected. There are, after all, few other objects that you would put in your mouth after they've already been... Wait. Sorry, let me retake the sentence. There are, after all, few other objects that you would put in your mouth after they had already been in who knows how many other people's mouths beforehand. Because you use utensils that other people have used at restaurants. How would you feel if I suggested you use somebody else's toothbrush? So what exactly is different about cutlery? Can you clean a cup? You can clean metal utensils much easier than fiber from toothbrushes. I think that's the difference. Maybe there's also some other difference. It just feels weird. In the years to come, I believe we're going to go through some radical innovation in the way in which we move food from the plate or the bowl into our mouths. I hope that open-minded cutlery makers out there will take this scientific insights into about the receptor profile of the average human being in their average human mouth in the latest gastrophysics research and translate this into knowledge, into aesthetically pleasing cutlery designs that will enhance our tasting experiences. The likelihood that the results of our labors will be first found within the confines of the modernist restaurants. And from there, the signature cutlery will slowly start to appear on the marketplace, perhaps under the brand name of some top chef. Interesting. You know, I didn't even think about this, but I have some cups that are better than this cup that I have here. I like this cup a lot. Just thinking of utensils. So this is a nice cup because it's silver. I can show you. This cup. It's a silver cup. The inside is silver. Here, there you go. I think you could see that. Yeah, the inside is silver. And the outside is this wood from Thailand called Nara wood. It's pretty red wood. It looks really cool. So it feels really great because it's nice and insulated. It's pretty smooth on the outside, and then the silver part is really hot. It gets really hot, and also the material changes how the liquid feels. Does something to the liquid, makes it feel good. So it's a pretty nice cup. I like how it feels. I like the touch of it. I like when I can pick it up and I can feel the wood part, which is not very hot, and I can also feel the silver part at the same time, which is pretty hot. But this cup is not. I have another cup that has flares on it, like it's flared like this. You see how the lip is like flared out? It makes it easier to drink because you don't have to turn the cup as much, so it slides out a lot easier. Feels really great cup to use, but I don't have that cup with me currently. It's upstairs. But a great cup to demonstrate some of the differences of touch. That other cup that I have has some weird texture on the outside of it. Feels really good. It also is fully silver. The whole thing is silver, so it gets really hot, which is sometimes pleasant and sometimes very difficult to handle because it's about as hot as the tea is, and the tea is really hot. But I like it. I like the variation. I'm using one cup or a different cup. I like it all. The same goes with all these other utensils I'm using. this cup with this lid on it that I'm using to strain my tea, it's pretty, it gets kind of hot, but it doesn't have anything particularly, I mean, it feels nice actually, it does feel nice. I have one that's really too big for me, that kind of slips out of my hand a bit. Not so great. I have another one that's clay. It feels so good. The texture of it is amazing. The way that it pours is always very consistently good. And since it's pretty rough, it always feels very stable. The lid doesn't ever feel like it's gonna slip. Anyway, all that adds to the experience of drinking the tea or preparing the tea, which primes me for drinking the tea, and it feels really good. The next section, here's a question. Would you enjoy eating with a textured spoon? So, to get us started on the tactile journey, take the example shown in figure 1.5. Look at that figure 1.5. It's a pretty sensual picture. Mouth open, tongue out, and this weird object, which is a spoon, presumably. It looks like a thick spoon with spikes on it. Like spikes, I say spikes, but they're like really small, like bumps. Let's just say bumps on them. I would love to try this. It looks pretty cool. How do you think your experience would be if you were to eat with the aid of something as spectacular as this? More memorable, probably. More stimulating, absolutely. Unfortunately, the spoon shown in this figure is one of a kind. I very much doubt you'll be able to find the designer's work for sale on Amazon anytime soon. It's a shame, really, given how boring the texture of most cutlery currently is. But at least one mainstream cutlery manufacturer has brought out a commercial range of sensorial spoons with the added textural interest. And here's another figure of 4 different spoons from the Studio William. I can't really see what the textures are there from this angle. Oh, I can see. Okay. One of them is kind of bumpy. One of them is like, it's got like holes in the middle, but they're like different shaped holes. Let's see. Oh, rain. Okay, they have names. The first one's raindrop, second one's ripple, the third one's flow, the last one's droplet. So it looks like they have just cutouts. Here, do you see? My autofocus is not autoly focusing. There we go. So it's got cutouts in the spoon that you will feel if you're gripping the spoon with your lips as you pull the spoon out of your mouth. I think that's the idea. These 4 textured spoons caress your tongue in unusual ways, but we still are researching together with Chef Yosef Yusuf and the top cutlery designer William Welch into whether any of these spoons do anything especially good at enhancing any specific tastes or flavors or textures in your food. For those of you who haven't yet acquired your own set of sensorial spoons, which is probably everybody, there are nonetheless some simple ways to stimulate your guests' tongues more effectively without having to invest in a whole new set of cutlery. But I do want to invest in a whole new set of cutlery. Next time you invite your folks round for dinner, why not surprise them? Wet some spoons with lemon juice. Don't do this with silver spoons, though, if you don't want to get into trouble. What? Okay, wet some spoons with lemon juice, and it says in parenthetical, best not try this with the silver ones if you don't want to get into trouble. I don't know what lemon does to silver. Next, dip them into something crystalline or gritty like sugar or a little ground coffee, and allow them time to dry. Then, just before you're about to serve, place a dollop of something tasty on top and hand it to your guests. This, uh, anyway, is the technique that some of my cutlery artist friends, like Caroline Hopkins, use to tickle their guests' tongues in ways that they might not have been stimulated previously. Even top restaurants have used this approach. For example, Alina's Osteria dish, at the very least, the unusual texture will surprise the diner and hence make them a little bit more mindful about what they are eating. Another way in which to alter your guests' experience of food is to change the material properties of the cutlery itself. One cheap solution here involves laying the table with some wooden picnic cutlery rather than your normal kitchen knives and forks, and probably save on washing up too. But bear in mind how one diners responded when Norma, currently one of the world's top restaurants, tried something similar. They introduced high-end wooden utensils into the service of the restaurants in Copenhagen. While I have not yet had the opportunity to try them for myself, one colleague who visited the restaurant in 2015 was certainly disappointed. As she wrote to me after her return, it was like eating with a spork from a takeaway. Wow. It would really be interesting to conduct the appropriate study in a restaurant setting to see whether this response is more general. So would you enjoy eating with a wooden spoon at a fancy restaurant? Oh, okay. I'm reading here. They have a figure here, and it says that the unusual texture is nice, but the weight is probably too light. So having heavy utensils is a major aspect of enjoyment. Things being heavier is better. Oh, and that's the next section, all about heaviness. Give me 1 second. I've been feeling a bit congested in my nasal passage this morning. A moment. Is it just me, or is this talking agitate the sinuses? Maybe it's just me. Am I just nasally talking? Is it just me because I'm nasally talking? Nasally talking agitate the sinuses more? Something about that. Nose is feeling a little agitated this morning. The name of this section is Wait, What Is It Good For? A really, really bad pun. That doesn't even make any sense. There's no reason to have this pun. Before I go into the section, I have a question about the last section. I don't even understand what this thing about dipping your spoon into lemon juice. So let's say you have a stainless steel spoon, dip it in lemon juice, put it into sugar, and then dollop something on top of it. I don't know what the something on top of it is. It just says dollop something tasty on top of it. Now how is that? I mean, I guess that's giving me textured food, but is that giving me a textured spoon? I want a textured spoon, not textured food. You're just giving me extra sugar in my food. That doesn't seem like a very effective way to do the thing that I'm thinking that I want to do. That's the end of me thinking about that. Wait, what is it good for? I want to instinctively say absolutely nothing because I feel like that's what they're going for here. But I'm assuming that we're going to find out that it's actually good for something. I cannot emphasize enough how important weight is to the design of cutlery. It's the first sentence. He's like throwing me all directions here with this silly pun. You definitely want to have a good heft in the hand, not to mention the right balance between one end and the other end. Oh, okay. You gotta get healthy. You gotta get that nice and heavy. You gotta get that nice, but the balance. One of the first things I noticed at Heston Blumenthal's The Fat Duck restaurant was how heavy the cutlery is. Really hefty pieces made from wood and from steel and from made in the French laguiole style. Don't know what that means. I'm gonna look that up. The French laguiole. That's Laguiole. Laguiole. It's a type of knife. Laguiole. It's a thing. I mean, I don't know what it means, but it's a thing. Laguiole. Authentic Laguiole knives. I don't know what it means. Oh, I think it's the... Okay. They're utensils that seem to have curved handles. But I'm just seeing pictures, not a definition. A laguiole knife, pronunciation laguiole. A laguiole knife is a traditional Occitan pocket knife produced in the knife city of Thiers, the source of 70% of French cutting tools, French cutlery. And it's from a small town of Laguiole, located in the massive central region of French. It's a pocket knife style. All right. Type of pocket knife. The cutlery maker William Welch, the designer of the textured spoons that we saw before, knows intuitively that making sure his cutlery feels good in the hand is really important. As important, he told me, for most people as it looks. So the feeling is as important. Now, for whatever reason, I don't know why. I just thought about, I have a couple friends who are obsessed with keyboards, but I have a friend who's like really obsessed with computer keyboards. You know, having like split keyboards that are like perfectly ergonomical, so you don't have to move. You can like sit perfectly still and like get everything perfectly. I'm just imagining that, but for cutlery, obviously you have to move still with most cutlery. You'd have to move the food from the plate to your mouth with cutlery, but the idea of having like perfectly ergonomical cutlery is just coming to mind. In contrast, it is amazing to me how many young chefs skimp on their cutlery. It is understandable, of course. Imagine some young Turks opening their first gastropub out in the countryside somewhere. They have poured their life saving into the endeavor and are likely to be running short of cash when they open. Heavy cutlery might seem like a luxury more than a necessity, right? But if they can cut that corner, they'll end up serving beautifully prepared food to be eaten with what feels like light canteen cutlery. If it really distracts from the overall experience, I'm sure you'd intuitively agree. But what does this gastrophysics research say? I don't understand what we just said the word Young Turks, and I don't know why that phrase came out of nowhere, but that's not a that's not something you just want to casually drop, is it? And this guy's like European too, so I guess he should know that. It seems a bit insensitive. I don't know if Young Turks means something other than what I know that it means in terms of a particular radical militia group from some European country, probably Turkey, and they attacked a lot of other people from different groups. Doesn't seem like a phrase that you want to just drop. Maybe they got the name from a idiom. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know enough about European history. It seemed weird to me. That's all I'm saying. Given the differing priorities out there, it was obviously time for the gastrophysicist to step in and conduct an appropriate study. Of course, our first job was to check the scientific journals to see what had already been done. The really surprising thing was that the literature was pretty much silent on the topic of cutlery and the impact of cutlery on the experience of food and drink. How could something so fundamental have been ignored for so long? That's how most things are. Like, people just aren't paying attention to these things. Not everybody's obsessed with whatever particular detail you're obsessed with that afternoon. You're doing some scientific studies. So in our own research, we wanted to determine once and for all just how important the weight of cutlery in the hand really is to the experience of food in the mouth or in the mind. We had already conducted a series of studies here in the cross-modal research laboratory, demonstrating that if people tasted food with a heavier spoon, they generally had better things to say about it than when they had the exact same food eaten with a lighter spoon instead. But evaluating store-bought yogurt from a heavy plastic spoon in the lab is a long way from setting of a high-end restaurant. Would the same also apply to restaurants? That's a good question. But it's interesting that they are specifically testing store-bought yogurt with plastic utensils and then heavier utensils. So I guess, I mean, I usually eat store-bought yogurt personally. Might be nice if I had some heavier utensils. My store-bought yogurt is full fat, no sugar. It's a little sour. And not much else other than sour. Could use a little bit of help is what I'm saying with the heavier utensils. In many of our highly controlled laboratory experiments, the same people taste putatively different foods with spoons varying markedly in terms of their weight. Putative is a word that I've heard and I'm sure that I should be familiar with, but I don't know the meaning. Putative. Is that right? Putative, yeah. Considered or reputed to be. Reputed. If I don't know what computative means, do I know what reputable means? Okay. People taste putatively different foods with spoons varying marketed. Okay, so they're considered to be different foods. They're told that they're different foods, but they're the same food. Is that the idea? In many of our highly controlled laboratory experiments, the same people taste putatively different foods with spoons varying markedly in terms of their weight. So I think that means that they're eating the same food, but different spoons. I'm just going to read on because I'm not fully sure. One of the benefits of using the same participants is that we can be sure that the results we obtain are due to our experimental manipulation and not due to individual differences between people. However, on the negative side, it's possible that the format of our studies might have focused on participants' attention to unnaturally on the weight. Imagine yourself being asked to taste food over and over again for up to an hour, when the most salient thing that varies is the weight of the cutlery that you're given to use. With nothing else to occupy the mind, there's a very real danger that the cutlery's weight might capture your attention and hence influence your behavior in a way that simply wouldn't do in a restaurant. Given such concerns, which it should be said applied to much laboratory research, given these concerns, I was looking out for an appropriate opportunity to test the cutlery idea in the wild. Of course, I would love to carry out a study with the diners holding that oh-so-heavy cutlery in the fat duck, but that is just never going to happen. Why not? Well, much funding body would agree to pick up the tab for all my subjects. Which funding body would agree to pick up the tab for all my subjects? Yes, those well-fed guinea pigs at the end of the night. Currently, the price of the restaurant is nearly £300 a head. And that's before the wine or the service. You pay tip in Britain? Would I pay £300 for service? Would I pay £300 for a meal? I think I would. I'd pay $300 or $350. I don't know how much pounds and dollars. I don't know how related they are. I'd pay $350 for a meal. I think that'd be worth it, especially if it's a good meal. I'd like it. Luckily enough, though, at around this time, I was invited to give a talk at the International Egg Confederation Conference. The organizers wondered whether I would mind awfully running a 3-course experimental lunch for the delegates, so that they could get an idea of what a real gastrophysics research experiment was like. I couldn't believe my luck. They had just offered me the perfect opportunity to test out my theory that weight in the hand really does matter in our enjoyment of food in the mouth. It was at this very moment that I had been waiting for. But would the experiment actually work? Out there in an ecologically valid testing situation. Imagine the scene: 150 international conference delegates in a swanky hotel restaurant somewhere in the city of Edinburgh. The diners were randomly dispersed across different tables. There was a scorecard by each plate setting on and pencils on the table so that the diners could record their responses. They were asked how much they liked the food, how artistically they thought it had been plated, and how much they would have been willing to pay for the dish in a restaurant, like the ones they happened to be sitting in. That seems like a weird question. How much would you be willing to pay for a dish after you've eaten it? I've never considered how much. I guess I don't think much about money in general, so I don't think about how much I would be willing to pay. But like, you usually pay for food after reading a menu. Like, you never think about paying for the food after you've eaten, like it's been presented to you, you've enjoyed it, and you've eaten it. Seems like a weird time to think about the payment of the food. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. While the conference delegates were very much aware of the fact that they were taking part in an experiment, they didn't know what the specific research questions being addressed were for each dish. For the main course, a piece of loc etive, I don't know how to say this word. Loc etive, a type of salmon. A piece of salmon was for the first course. The service staff had laid light canteen cutlery on half the tables and heavy, expensive cutlery on the rest of the tables. The eagle-eyed reader might have noticed that both the weight of the cutlery and the quality of the cutlery varied. However, the fact of the matter was that it's really hard to get heavy, poor quality cutlery, and even if we found some, it was really no way anyone was going to splash out on 70 sets just so we could run this study. So As is often is the case, we had to work within the confines of what was on hand, and in the case it was canteen cutlery versus restaurant quality cutlery. But still, we weren't asking people about the cutlery, we were just asking about the food. The results were unequivocal. Those eating with the heavier cutlery thought their food had been plated more artistically, and crucially, they were willing to pay significantly more for the food that they were eating on the same day in the same dining room. But who just so happened to be holding the more than the people who had been holding the lighter cutlery? I read that sentence incorrectly, but I think the meaning goes across. So it really is just that straightforward. Adding weight to your guests' hands will likely make them think that you're a better chef. With that in mind, why not reach into the cutlery drawer right now and feel up your own? Are you sure that you are creating the right impression? But you don't want to take things too far, do you? I have heard rumors of one restaurant where the diners started to complain because the cutlery was too heavy to lift comfortably. There's a great Pogue, P-U-G-H, Pogue. There's a great Pogue cartoon in the Daily Mail based on heavy cutlery findings. It showed a couple dining at a table with an older woman slaving away at the kitchen. Underneath, the punchline read, "I've changed the cutlery twice, and your mother's cooking still tastes horrible." Lol. If it's really that simple, I can probably do something to make my cups heavier. Now, it didn't say that it generalizes to beverages, but I'm just gonna assume. And it would be extremely easy to do. Actually, I don't know if it would be extremely easy, but I'm sure I can just add a weight to the bottom of my cup. Maybe glue it or tape it or something like that. Another momentary break. 1 second, please. Momentary break has been momentarily finished. So I think it would be easy for me to just change the weight of my utensils. The next section is all about texture. It says specifically fuzzy cutlery. I'll get in that in a moment. Oh, these pictures look great. They look amazing. I would love to have fuzzy cutlery. And then there's a section on eating with your hands. Unfortunately, there's no way for me to drink tea with my hands. Is there? Is there? I don't think there's a way to drink tea with my hands. Is there? Maybe there is a way to drink tea with my hands. It doesn't seem like a... I'm going to write it down. I gotta write down a couple of things because I feel like that was a long section. I read a very long section about the weight. We didn't get much information about the texture, but the section about the weight, I feel like that could have been like the first sentence was I cannot emphasize how important weight is on the design of cutlery. That was the first sentence. I feel like he could have said one more sentence about the experiment, and then one last sentence that heavier is better. That could have just been 3 sentences, but it was 3 pages. Heavier is better. That's all I got here. And I'm wondering, can I drink tea from my hands? Like, I'm just imagining, first of all, it's going to be messy. Second thing is, I'm imagining that it's going to mess up the water, the liquid. Like, I've made the water to have a specific concentration of minerals so that it's smoother to drink and so on. And I think that drinking with the hands would kind of mess that up a little bit. And I'm sure that it's difficult in terms of smoothness and the ease of the pour from the utensil to the mouth. I won't try it on stream. I'm going to have to try this another time when I can easily wash my hands. I also imagine it might be a bit sticky. Though it's just tea without sugar, maybe it won't be sticky. It's a lot of thinking and not a lot of... Okay. This will take 5 seconds to do, so I'm going to do it. It might be too hot. It is too hot. I gotta let my water cool down. I'm gonna let my tea cool down a little bit. And I'm gonna pour some tea into my hand. I'm gonna drink it. And I'm gonna pour some tea into this cup, and we're gonna taste the differences. So I have to pay attention to the tea for a bit. It's pretty nice. It's really pungent. It's like exploding in my sinuses, and I can feel it all through my nostril and nasal passages. A nice texture in the mouth, nice mouthfeel. Quite smooth. The aftertaste is like mustard. All right. It feels good. It actually feels really good to pour hot liquid into my hand. Never done that before. It feels great. Okay, obviously it's very hard to do because it's like spilling everywhere. It's hard to get a lot, so I got such a small amount that I feel like I got it all over my face. I got such a small amount that I could barely taste it. Hold on, all right. And I'm limited by how much I could pour because of obviously the shape of the hand. You know how you've poured water into your hand before, or you've tried to hold water in your hand, but also the heat. You know, I can't say it's a very good experience, but it was exciting. It was very exciting. I would do it again. I would definitely do it again. Can't get any really distinguishable flavors from it. Okay, so it's a bit floury. I'm getting flour, I'm getting the mustard, I'm getting the pungency from it. There's like a berry Okay, we also have it's like a lavender kind of fuzzy feeling. There's like a honey note to it. All right, going last time for the hand. Extremely difficult to try. Extremely difficult. I got wet hands. I spilled water all over my face. A little bit on my shirt. Can't really pick up any of the flavors. I'm gonna say the hand cup is not worth doing. But I would like to do it again. It feels good. There's something about how it feels. It feels really good. Like it directly on the hand feels good, and the attempt to drink from the hand feels pretty interesting. All right. That answered my question. I asked the question, can I drink tea from my hands? Yes, I can. Not great. But fun. Okay. Maybe I wonder if there could be like a hand-shaped cup. Hmm. Or I could drink from this scoop. This is a scoop. This is where I usually put my tea, my dry tea into this and display it. There's also where I weigh it before I drink. I could pour liquid into this and drink it like this. Anyway. Thinking of hand-shaped utensils. Fuzzy cutlery, anyone? Periodically, we have a lab dinner parties at my house here in Oxford. On one such occasion, Charles Michel, the then chef in residence, decided to get rabbit from the market and prepare it a stew. It was delicious, I can assure you, but the most memorable thing about this evening was that this dish in particular was what the Paul Bocuse Cookery School trained chef, had done to my wife's cutlery. What he had done to my wife's cutlery. He had asked about a butcher's for the clean rabbit pelts. I don't know what rabbit pelts is. The stuff that normally just gets thrown away. I'm gonna look up what pelts is. Rabbit pelts. Oh, it's like the fur. The skin of rabbits, which include the fur. Okay. He asked about this rabbit pelts. In a stroke of genius, he wrapped them around the handles of the spoons. Oh. In an instant, the cutlery became truly multisensory. F.T. Marinetti would have been so proud. F.T. Marinetti is a futurist from the Dadaist movement in the Italian in the 20s in Italy. Here's an image. This is utensils wrapped in rabbit fur. Sitting around the dining table, we all tentatively held the soft, furry skin in our paws, the faint aroma of animal emanating from our hand. It's a weird sentence to say. Faint scent of animal. There's no doubt straight away that everyone had a much greater awareness where the dinner had really come from. So there's a famous example of the cup that's furry, which is there, which is from something different. How do you have a furry cup? I guess you can just drink from wet fur. On the right is Merritt Oppenheim's object from 1936, a fur-covered cup in a saucer and a spoon. How would you feel about putting this cup to your lips to drink? This is an art piece. Okay, it's just an art piece. It's very subversive at the time, given its sexual connotations. What? What sexual connotations? There's just something about fur that you don't want coming too close to your lips. One can imagine what Freud would say on the matter. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand who wouldn't want fur coming close to their lips. First of all, I don't understand what the sexual connotation of having a furry cup is. What at all is sexual about furry cups? I'm not getting any of that at all. But anyway, the name of it is called Object. I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm not seeing the sexuality here. He didn't mention anything about the sexuality of this image. He didn't say anything about the sexuality of this image, but he's saying something is sexual about a furry cup. That's a bit... Maybe I'm the weird one here. I don't know. It's possible. Now, when the chef was working on the short placement at the Fat Duck, I went to dine, and the kitchens came out with something very interesting. Take a tomato and boil it to loosen the skin, and try to remove pieces of the skin that are as large as possible. Then take the skin and press it into strips onto the lip of a glass. Then serve it in something like a gazpacho soup. A gazpacho soup in a glass with tomato skin covering the rim of the lip. What you get as a diner is the most peculiar sensation, a little animalistic, especially when inverted tomato skin comes into contact with your lower lip. Animalistic. Imagine my surprise when just a few months later, the overweight furry white spoon in figure 5.5 greeted me when I got into the last course of the Fat Duck. Here down here. Do you see that? You see that there? This is a spoon that's weighted and furry. It's a bit thick on the... Oh, I don't know how furry it is. Maybe the actual part that you can hold is pretty thin, but it's thick and fur. Anyway, he was happy to see this. Now, I am not sure that this spoon was necessarily the ideal choice. The dish itself was all white, light and airy, so I could imagine a surprisingly light spoon worked well here. Instead, what you get is a spoon that is noticeably heavier than you thought it was going to be. The distinctive baby powder aroma of the heliotropin originates from the handle. Heliotropin. Though perhaps that is the idea, to create an even more contrast in what you might have expected when you're going in. That seems weird to taste baby powder, to smell baby powder as you're eating. Diners came away from the experience thinking a little bit more carefully about the weight of their cutlery and the influence that might have on their experience of food. Huh. Okay, the name of the dish is Counting Sheep. It's the final dish of a tasting menu at the Fat Duck. If you saw a spoon like this, how heavy would you expect it to be? It was actually very heavy. It's called Counting Sheep. It's all white, and it has the scent of baby powder. Huh. However, while you want the cutlery to enhance the taste of your food, you don't necessarily want it to become the center of your attention to distract the diners away from what they are eating. There is, I think, a very real danger of this happening with the counting sheep dish. At least, there would be if it weren't for the fact that your dessert is actually spinning on a pillow that is magically floating in mid-air. Yes, really, it's using magnetic levitation. The likes of which you've probably never seen unless you have stopped at the Artesian Bar in Langham Hotel in London, where the cocktail with a balloon floating over it has been on the menu for a couple of years. This, then, is the aim of much of the research in my lab, to figure out how to use the latest insights with gastrophysics to create a better and more memorable tasting experience. So again, this is the picture, and apparently it's actually food that's levitating due to some sort of magnetic device, and it's spinning on a pillow, magnetically levitating, spinning on a pillow. I think that would be more distracting than the spoon. Oh my gosh, okay, I'm looking at all these subtitles, subchapter titles. All right, the next subchapter. Eating with your hands. Have you ever thought about the fact that the hamburger is one of the world's most popular foods, and it's usually eaten with the hands? I would go as far as to say that it tastes better when grasped between one's thumbs and forefingers than eaten with a daintily knife and fork from a plate or a plank. I personally usually eat with a fork and knife. These days I go to a restaurant called Battle and Brew pretty often, and I eat. They have a burger that I like. It's not a great burger, but it's a good burger. It's a good burger, and I eat it with a fork and knife. I went to a place called Au Cheval in Chicago last month, and I had a burger. It was fantastic, and I did eat it with my hands. I usually eat with a fork and knife. I wonder why I ate that one with my hands. I don't know. It was a good burger. It had a thick slab of bacon on it. Had a sunny side up fried egg. Amazing, amazing. Anyway, I usually eat burgers with a fork and knife, just because I don't want to have to rewash my hands multiple times. I usually want to do stuff and move around. I think that's what it was. When I went to Au Cheval, I was pretty focused on the food. I was only eating the food and not doing anything else. Usually when I'm at Battle and Brew, I'm hanging out with friends and talking and touching stuff. Okay. So I guess eating with the hands makes me more focused. The same goes. I'm thinking now again. I just drank some tea out of my hand, and my hand is not really. I mean, I'm saying not really, but it's actually not at all sticky. It's just as if I poured water on my hand and dried off the water. So that was a fun experience. Anyway, the same goes for fish and chips, straight from the newspaper at the seaside too. At least it used to be, for someone banned newspaper wrappings as unhygienic. Oh wow! So people used to use newspaper wrapping. Anyway. Now, I am the first to admit that there are a lot more going on in the latter case to explain the pleasure of that experience than merely just using one's hands. Still, think about it carefully. It is surprising how many foods really do seem to taste better when eaten like this. No wonder, then, that the popular U.S. chef Zachary Palacio titled his cookbook "Eat with Your Hands," and he was very much on trend. It is not just food that people are eating with their fingers nowadays. It's also haute cuisine. I've never heard the word haute cuisine. It's like haute couture. Haute cuisine, high fashion or high I don't know. I don't know what the direct translation of this word is. I don't know what the. I don't know if haute couture is the direct translation of high fashion. But anyway, haute cuisine, fancy food. For, as we saw in the beginning of this chapter, a growing number of top Michelin-star restaurants have been incorporating dishes that are to be eaten without cutlery, or else to be eaten with totally new forms of cutlery. Going the whole hog is probably doomed to failure, at least in the context of fine dining. Restaurants like Il Gambellino in Milan, where the diners are not provided with any cutlery at all, don't tend to last long, especially not in the capital of risotto. Ooh, eating risotto with just your hands seems like a good idea. Seems like a very fun and sticky experience. Interestingly, though, I am trying to figure out the reason behind this. Finger food tends to make its appearance at the start of a meal rather than later on. If any of you have any ideas about why this should be so, then let me know. Okay. Finger foods early. Before utensils. So maybe try drinking tea with your hand before drinking tea with the cups. Many people write to me saying that for them, food really does taste better when eaten with the hands. This seems to be especially true for people from India who have grown up using their fingers for this purpose. A number of them report that food just appears to lose its taste whenever they eat using cutlery. The following is from the Indian narrator in Yan Martel's book, The Life of Pi. This illustrates the point. The first time I went to an Indian restaurant in Canada, I used my fingers. The waiter looked at me critically and said, "Fresh off the boat, are you?" I blanched. My fingers, which a second before could have had been taste buds savoring the food a little ahead of my mouth, became dirty under his gaze. They froze like criminals caught in the act. I didn't dare lick them. I wiped them guiltily on my napkin. He had no idea how deeply those words wounded me. They were like nails that had been driven into my flesh. I picked up the knife and fork. I had hardly ever used such instruments. My hands trembled. My sambar lost all its taste. I've always wanted to compare what people say when they're eating and rating a range of foods with either their fingers or with a knife and fork or even chopsticks. Of course, the answer is likely to depend on the food being served and in the context, not to mention in the individual diner and what they're used to and what they've grown up with. I wonder if I eat a lot of Asian food and I eat it usually with a chopstick. A set of chopsticks, 2 chopsticks. Does that change the taste? Would it be better or different if I eat with fork and knife versus a chopstick? I wouldn't need a knife. Fork versus chopstick or hands. It's also very easy to test. I go to Korean barbecue pretty often, so it's pretty simple to try that out, all 3. Nonetheless, there are some intriguing results already out there showing that food we feel in the hands really does influence our perception in the mouth. I'm gonna write this down for myself. I could also just take my own utensils, or I could just do it at home. No, I can take my own utensils. I want to try with good food. Anyway, I gotta think about this. Taking better utensils to a restaurant and using those myself. Seems like a fancy idea. Nevertheless, retaking the sentence, there are some intriguing results already out there showing that food that we feel in our hands really does influence our perception of the food in our mouths. For instance, my colleague Michel Barnett-Cowan conducted this study in Canada in which he somehow managed to glue together 2 half pretzels with the opposing ends sometimes having the same texture, either both fresh or both stale, and sometimes having different textures, Just imagine the situation. You might be holding a stale pretzel in your hand, but munching on a soft one versus the other, vice versa. The results reveal that the feel of the food in the hand really did influence what people had to say about their food in the mouth. Okay, so holding a pretzel, I don't have a visual of this. Holding a pretzel, you know, they're glued together in this way, and you're holding a stale one and eating a fresh one, or holding a fresh one and eating a stale one, and so on. Once again, this simple change that any of us could try the next time we invite friends around to eat: withhold the cutlery. A few of the readers might be worrying about what Debrett's Guide to Etiquette might have to say on this subject. Good news, the 2012 version of this Debrett Guide to Etiquette finally acknowledged that finger food was acceptable in polite society, at least for certain foods such as pizzas, calzone, and ice cream cones. Whatever you do, though, be sure to not lick your fingers afterwards. And finally, eating with the hands can also be a good idea on the first date, at least if you believe the results of 2,000 people reported in this paper recently. Men apparently find women making a mess while eating with their hands a big turn on. So now that you know, that's interesting. And if you are a man hoping to make a good first impression on ladies, the top tip was to make sure to not to order a salad for your main course. I do like to see some messy eating, personally. Adds up. Lines up to my experience. On to the next section. We're going to take it. We're going to keep going. How much would you enjoy food moving in your mouth? My colleague Sam Bumpus describes a dinner he attended in Korea where the tentacles of a live squid were cut directly onto his plate. His host earnestly recommended that Sam chew vigorously in order to prevent the still squirming suckers from sticking in his throat on the way down. Disgusting, right? That sounds actually pretty interesting to me. So it is ironic then that while our visual attention is undoubtedly drawn to our food in motion, once the food enters the oral cavity, movement is the last thing that we want. Speak for yourself. This deep-seated aversion to things wiggling around in our mouths, and still worse, things wiggling around in our throats, was presumably partly what caused such a stir when Noma served live ants a few years back. The entomophagy angle not helping much here either. Oh, entomophagy. I think that means eating bugs or something like that. I'm sure I've read that word before. I went in one time in Belize. I was in Belize. One time I went to Belize. One of the Belizean folks on a hike said that there were some special ants, and those ants tasted minty. So he got a stick, poked a tree, had some ants crawl on the stick, and then ate some of the ants and said that it tasted minty, and asked everybody in my party if they would like to try it. And everybody in my party rejected the idea. Except me, of course. I tried eating the minty ants, and they were indeed minty. It was a bit strange. But I didn't feel them wiggling around in my mouth. I mean, I guess eating like 2 ants at a time. But I started chewing them immediately. I didn't let them roam around and get acquainted with the new place before killing and eating them. I just did it quickly. But perhaps next time, I'll let him get familiar with the mouth. It was also the thought of movement in the mouth that made everyone so squeamish when I was in school in Canada for a year, a long, long time ago. The prefix were there challenged themselves to eat a live goldfish from a bowl every time the home ice hockey team scored, which was very rare. Evolutionary speaking, this dislike of movement in the mouth is probably an old mechanism that helped our ancestors to avoid the risk of choking. This is like an evolutionary psychology book also, along with being gastronomy and psychophysics. Even food that moves on the plate can be both hypnotic and disturbing. The bonito flakes served in Japanese restaurants sometimes do this, not to mention the squirming of a live abalone and hagfish that sometimes one sees at Korean barbecues. I've not seen these before. I need to go to better Korean barbecues, apparently. That said, note how the language of menus often tries to give the impression that there is still some life in whatever is being served. There's a great line in Steve Coogan's and Rob Brydon's TV series, The Trip, where, after a dish was introduced as resting by the waiter, Rob Brydon points out, rather optimistic to say that they're resting, their days of resting have been long gone. They're all dead. True, but dead just feels like a word that should never appear on the menu. Yeah, you don't want dead food. You want to eat dead food. You want live food. It does kind of feel weird to say dead food, but saying live food is also strange. You want to imply life. More generally, the texture of food in the mouth, even when it is not moving, seems to be a particularly strong driver of our food's likes and dislikes. For example, many Asian consumers find the texture of rice pudding to be more off-putting than its taste, or than its flavor. By contrast, many Westerners breakfasting in Japan, when they try fermented black natto, the texture and consistency won't soon be forgotten. I've never had natto. And take the oyster, that's the shellfish's slippery, slimy texture, not its taste and flavor that most people typically find so objectionable. I would love to try, but I'm allergic. Many agreeing with the late British food critics A. Gill's memorable description of them as sea snot in a half shell. That does not sound appealing. The first slippery, slimy sounds appealing. Sea snot does not sound appealing. Of course, the textural which he's calling the oral somatosensory, that's the word. The oral somatosensory properties can also constitute a key part of what we find so pleasing about the foods that we love. Indeed, a number of researchers have argued that this is a key part of the appeal of chocolate, one of the few foods that melt in the mouth at mouth temperature. Try eating a very cold versus a very warm piece of chocolate to experience this difference. Texture then plays a crucial role in determining our perception of the food's quality. Its acceptability is ultimately our food and beverages preference. Just think about it. Comfort foods usually have a soft texture, such as mashed potatoes and applesauce and many puddings. In fact, it has been argued that foods having this texture tend to be thought of as comforting and nourishing. By contrast, many snack foods are crispy, like chips and pretzels. Texture contrast is something that many chefs and food developers work with, and more generally, it is known to be something that consumers value in food. As Barb Stuckey points out in her book, Taste What You're Missing, Good chefs go to great lengths to add texture and contrast to their plates, utilizing 4 different approaches: within one meal on a plate, and within a complex food, within a simple food. So there are 4 different approaches. You have a meal on a plate. This sentence is that I'm not comprehending the sentence. Let me just read it again. Barb Stuckey puts it in her book called Taste What You're Missing. Quote, good chefs go to great lengths to add texture contrast to their plates, utilizing 4 different approaches. Within a meal, on the plate, within a complex food, and within a simple food. These are the 4 different approaches. Within a meal is one of the... Oh, okay. Contrast within a meal. I gotcha. Contrast within a meal, contrast on the plate, contrast within complex food, and contrast within simple food. What would be the contrast within simple food? If you have a simple food, what do you contrast? Alright. That's enough reading for today. We've read enough today. I'm done reading. I'm starting to feel cold. Something I don't understand about. I just don't understand. Maybe it's just me not moving around, being still. I'm just starting to feel cold. I was warm earlier, now I'm cold. But presumably it should be hotter. The sun's out and all that. But I'm feeling cold. I will have a stream coming soon about art. I'm very excited about it. I've been watching a podcast from Guru Viking with John Bram, I think his name is. Should probably remember his name. John Bram and Henry Shookman. And I quite like Henry Shookman. Just because I like art. He's a poet. I like koans a lot. This guy's he's a poet, and he talks about koans quite often. I like Henry Shookman. He's a cool dude. This other guy, John Bram, I'm just learning about him from watching these podcasts, and boy, oh boy, do I like this guy. He's a cool guy. All about poetry. He likes art a lot, and he's talking about art a lot. It's kind of more of what I like about him. Henry Shookman doesn't talk about art as much, though he's had many podcasts on Guru Viking about art, kind of vaguely, but they're mostly about meditation. They're not really about art. These podcasts with John Bram, they're about art, so I'm super into it. So I've been writing a bunch of notes, and I'm going to try a new format for doing typical React content. Of course, I'm doing React content, but I'm kind of trying to change the format of the React content. And one of the changes is to prepare, in that I'm writing notes for him. I'm pre-watching and writing notes. And another change in the content, the format, is I'm going to be lightly editing the video, the original video, to remove parts that I don't have anything to say about. So it's a bit more concise. And I'm going to play around with that to see where that goes. See where that format of the content goes. So I'm not really sure how it will go, but I'm interested. Anyway, we're going to be talking about moral instructions in video and in media and art, beauty and sacredness, acceptable emotions for artists, a little bit about critical theory. We're going to go into John Vervaeke's 4 types of knowings and how that's going to relate to art. This is something I'm thinking about. I'm not going to have enough time to really fully flesh it out before I present it in the stream that I'm going to be making. But maybe it eventually will fully flesh out. But I'm very interested in this whole idea because we've got the 4 different types of knowing. Propositional knowing, procedural knowing, perspectival knowing, and participatory knowing. And all of those different types of knowing, I'm going to have analogies for art and how you can interact with art in all those different ways. Propositionally, procedurally, perspectively, participatorily. Very interested in this. We're going to talk about what profundity even means and how to make something profound, or if you can make something profound. I don't like that word. We're going to talk about it. I don't like that word. Art as a spiritual practice. How art can make things beautiful, ordinary things beautiful. People have artistic allies. There's a lot. I got a lot of notes here. It's going to be a several hour long stream. I'm very excited for it. Anyway. We were just talking about chocolate. I like chocolate. I've got like a service that sends me nice chocolate, nice dark chocolate, single origin chocolate, and I think they all have a maximum of 3 ingredients. This one only has, it says 3 ingredients: cacao, cocoa butter, and cane sugar. I think they have to have less than 4 ingredients in order to be a part of the service. Anyway, I like it. I like it a lot. We were just talking about chocolate and the texture. I'm going to try to talk about the texture of this chocolate. First thing to do is to let it sit on the tongue and melt in the mouth. Pretty smooth. Just coating the mouth. It's very smooth, I should say. Very smooth. The chocolate itself is pretty soft. I kind of want to like rub it all around the roof of my mouth. It's like a very even glaze. It's smooth and uniform. Anyway, that's my talking very little bit about the texture of chocolate. All right, well, that's the end of the stream. I'm gonna stream sometime later this week. It probably won't be tomorrow, but it also might be tomorrow. But I doubt it. It might not be tomorrow. I don't think it'll be tomorrow. I have maybe 30 more minutes to finish the editing of this stream. Then I want to, the editing of the video that I want to stream for. So I'm probably gonna finish that today. But I also probably will do a little bit more and do it Saturday morning instead. Anyway, whatever. Sometime soon I'll be streaming. Gonna be all about art. I'll make a notification on YouTube and Discord or whatever. It'll be fun. All right, y'all. I'm off. Take care.